This video and every video on this channel is made possible by your support on patreon.com/616entertainment. I couldn't do this without you, and your contributions keep this channel alive. You can also grab an official shirt over on prowrestlingtees.com/616entertainment. What's not to love about a good racing game, right? And by good, I don't just mean a game that has beautiful graphics or a game that is super realistic down to the tiniest detail. When I say good, I'm talking about the fun factor. Does Mario Kart have photorealistic graphics? No, it has its own art style that works perfectly for that world. Do the karts in Crash Team Racing mimic real-world vehicles? Hell no, and they don't need to. At the end of the day, gameplay is king, and the aforementioned titles have a pristine foundation in their gameplay that all of the side dressing like characters, weapons, and graphics can later build upon. On this installment of The Life and Death, we're going to be focusing on a trilogy of racers exclusive to the PlayStation 3 that blended beautiful graphics, fun gameplay, and over-the-top environments into a perfect storm of entertainment. A Motorstorm, perhaps. Huh? No? Alright. Look, across its 3 entries from 2007 to 2011, and a couple pit stops in its little brother's territories along the way, Motorstorm caught the hearts and minds of millions of gamers. But through a lethal cocktail of release dates being pushed back due to horrible tragedies in real life, and the implementation of some odd design choices that may or may not have alienated the fan base, Motorstorm would eventually cross the finish line for the last time, seemingly never to race again. And today, we'll cover the entire run. What's up, Dan-Dans? My name is Ian. Thank you for being here with me today. Motorstorm is a franchise that I hold very near and dear, which is kind of odd for me because I'm not really a racing game guy at all. Maybe you're not a big racer either, that's totally fine. And here's an extra thank you for trusting me enough to click on a video covering a topic that you're not even attached to personally. I appreciate you. Today we're gonna crash, we're gonna burn, we're gonna boost across that finish line until the engine is running red hot, and we're going to avoid falling skyscrapers and volcanoes on our journey toward that beautiful checkered flag. This is the life and death of Motorstorm. Let's get to it. The team responsible for Motorstorm are Evolution Studios, or they were Evolution Studios. You know how this series is called The Life and Death? Yeah, the franchise in question won't be the only casualty of this story, unfortunately, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Evolution Studios were founded in 1999 and made their name in the early 2000s creating, what else? High-quality racing games. A quick scan at their body of work will reveal that Evolution were always connected to Sony consoles, having developed 5 World Rally Championship games exclusive to the PlayStation 2 before Motorstorm was even a glimmer in the team's eyes. This ongoing and honestly very successful relationship would eventually lead to Sony Interactive Entertainment outright purchasing Evolution Studios in late 2011, taking the team from longtime partner to family. In 2006, as their now parent company Sony moved away from the PlayStation 2 and onto the PlayStation 3, Evolution Studios would make a similar move. Their World Rally Championship series, which across its 5 outings had averaged an official game ranking score of 80.4%, would be retired. What was to come next was revealed at E3 in 2005, with a trailer that would blow the minds of some and raise an alarm of skepticism from others. We've been misled by, and I'm using air quotes here, trailers in the past. Remember when Killzone 2 was revealed and we were led to believe that what we were seeing was gameplay, and then it wasn't? Don't get me wrong, the Killzone 2 we wound up getting was still really good looking, but it didn't have the shine on it that the initial reveal sold us, you know? As consumers, we have to stay on our toes with what's presented to us, so I don't think there's anything wrong with a little bit of healthy skepticism. But back to Motorstorm. The E3 2005 reveal trailer created such a buzz because at the time, nobody had a PlayStation 3 yet. The console itself wouldn't launch for another year and a half, so these incredible visuals caught gamers by surprise. Is that real gameplay, or is it pre-rendered? Is this really what PlayStation 3 games are going to look like? Looking back on it, that was a fun era, wasn't it? I'm 31, my first console was an NES, so I feel like I was born at the perfect time as far as gaming is concerned. I remember back in the day when my brother and I got our Sega Genesis, and those 16-bit graphics blew us away. I remember when we got our PlayStation. Games like Mortal Kombat 4 and WCW vs. the World melted our brains. A few years later, I was playing WWE SmackDown Shut Your Mouth on the PlayStation 2. I'll never forget this. It was RVD versus Brock Lesnar inside Hell in a Cell. My dad was watching over my shoulder and he said, "That almost looks real. That's incredible." Nowadays, PlayStation 5 games look gorgeous. Your super powerful PC probably allows you to count a soldier's nose hairs in whatever game you're playing. Look, the point is this. I just don't think we're ever going to see a graphical leap again comparable to the one from late 2D into early 3D gaming. In 2022, graphical improvements come in the shape of lighting effects and realistic reflections and things of this nature. The appearances of humans and animals has come so far that there's just not much room left for improvement anymore, you know? Put an N64 game next to a GameCube game and it's astonishing. Put a PS4 game next to a PS5 game and it's like, yeah, I mean, it does look better. But the land of the seismic leap, it seems, has come and gone, which is a bummer. You know what's not a bummer though, is that when Motorstorm did eventually release, it looked great. You thought I forgot what I was talking about, didn't you? No sir. Let's get back to business. Motorstorm blasted onto store shelves in March of 2007, and while it was obvious that the visuals we were shown in that 2005 reveal were in fact pre-rendered, that's not to say the final product fell way short of expectations. Just look at this. I realize it's not 2007 anymore and that the footage you're seeing now is no longer the most insane thing out there, but I'll be damned if this doesn't still look good 15 years later. The deformation in the mud alone was enough back then to make my jaw drop. This was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. What do you mean that all of the tracks that the vehicles leave behind stay there through the entire race? Are you kidding? The ragdoll physics on drivers ejected from a crashed vehicle was always good for a pop, and the objects blocking certain paths weren't just invincible set dressing. All of these items are destructible. Trying to bash through a wall of debris on a motorcycle isn't as good an idea as taking it down when you're in a big rig, but hey, you live and learn. And on that subject, how about it? We've got 7 different types of vehicles to choose from. This isn't Beetle Adventure Racing on the N64, where every car is some type of Beetle. We can choose from an array of bikes, buggies, ATVs, racing trucks, rally cars, big rigs, and mud pluggers. Each vehicle has 3 different paint jobs, and each vehicle type has several different models to choose from. It's really a staggering amount of variety. Some races will put exclusively bikes on the track, and it's a battle of high speed and big balls where shortcuts and jumps are the name of the game. Other races will mix and match, casting every vehicle type onto the same track, making your every move a strategic one. If you're on an ATV, you better steer clear of giants like the big rig. On that same note though, maybe you're the guy in the big rig. Don't you dare find yourself trying to squeak through the cracks made for the little guys, or you're in big trouble. Each class of vehicle has its own strategies and game plans it should stick to if you're looking to go home with that first place trophy. One of Motorstorm's trademark mechanics is the boost system. It doesn't matter whether you're in a mud plugger or a racing truck. All vehicles are equipped with nitrous that will propel you forward like nobody's business. Using boost can be make or break, and managing your use of the boost meter is of utmost importance. Blasting that meter to the brink on a straightaway can leave already trailing opponents in the dust, but overdoing it is not good for business. No, seriously, you'll explode. Holding down the boost button too long will ring the alarm, the screen will shake, and you can practically feel your engine teetering on the edge of catastrophic combustion. Walking all the way up to that edge and not overstepping the limit is like a game in and of itself. The first two games I got with my PlayStation 3 were Resistance: Fall of Man and Motorstorm. You know, it's funny, I always tell these stories in my retrospectives of getting a console for Christmas or going to the store and picking out a game. When it comes to the PlayStation 3, I have no recollection of it whatsoever. I remember all the work I had to do to earn that beast, but as far as going to get it, gone. Completely missing from my memory. I can tell you that I do remember nearly having a heart attack on my first day of owning it. It wasn't the console's fault, it wasn't the game's fault, it was totally me, and you're about to find out why. Back in the day, controllers had cables, right? You had to be tied to the system in order to use the damn thing. Well, I was so flabbergasted by the 6-axis controller being wireless that I closed the glass door in my entertainment center to really drive home the fact that I was cable-free. If you've ever had your own modern video game console and you put it in an enclosed area for a long period of time, you know that they overheat. My PS3 got jet engine loud and crashed. I almost died on the spot, but luckily, everything was fine after I opened up that glass door and just let it sit for a while. But there you go. Word to the wise. Don't do that. Is it a silly question to ask whether or not there's a point to the races in a racing game? Not really, in my opinion. I mean, it's perfectly okay to ask about why we're racing in Motorstorm, because there actually is a point to it all. These vehicles weren't just zapped into the desert and some dude said, okay, this is the finish line. The game's overarching theme is centered around an extreme festival called Motorstorm. Adrenaline junkies of all kinds have traveled here to Monument Valley, which is a real-world location, if you were unaware. It's a stretch of the Colorado Plateau which spans across the state lines of both Utah and Arizona, and the footage you're seeing right now was actually captured by Evolution Studios themselves, and is featured in the extras section on Motorstorm's main menu. Isn't this beautiful? Seriously, man, it's no wonder why the in-game environments look so real. The team at Evolution had all of this gorgeous footage to use as a reference. Anyway, yeah, the Motorstorm Festival features dozens of competitions, and gaining access to these competitions is done by completing the previous ticket. I'd be a buffoon if I didn't take a second to touch on Motorstorm's soundtrack, Dan. From Wolfmother to Queens of the Stone Age to Every Time I Die, this soundtrack is a banger. High octane music adds a ton of energy to each and every competition. Don't get it twisted. I mentioned at the top that I'm not a huge fan of racing games. I don't buy Gran Turismo, I'm not a Forza guy. I like Mario Kart, I like Burnout Paradise, I like Motorstorm. If you're a Burnout fan who may have never tried Motorstorm before, honestly, I think you might be right at home here. It's not just the crazy tracks and vehicle variety that makes Motorstorm so enticing. I think the best part might just be that Motorstorm is never boring. Even if you're not fighting to overtake the guy in first place, it doesn't matter. Falling off a cliff is awesome. Smashing into the rocks is awesome. And watching your car burst into flames or your driver flail through the sky experiencing what absolutely must be their final moments, it's all big time. For as complimentary as I've been so far, no experience is completely flawless. I don't have much to complain about when it comes to this game, but Motorstorm's main issue is a pretty big one. I've beaten the staggering amount of vehicle types available to us into the ground. I know. What I haven't done much bragging about is the number of tracks available to us. Having 8 unique environments to race in might sound like a lot, but it's really not. I went out of my way to not repeat tracks too many times in the footage I captured, but I found myself having no choice inside of a couple hours. I resorted to repeating tracks but using different vehicle types in an attempt to hide the lack of depth. Future installments in the series would rectify this issue in a big way, but yeah, the original Motorstorm, you're going to be repeating these 8 tracks over and over and over if your goal is to complete the entire festival, which is a bummer. I'm probably the only person in the world who did this. You can let me know in the comments, but I would create storylines in my head to make up for how many deadly crashes I suffered during any given race. There's really no way around the fact that these wrecks are totally fatal, right? There's absolutely no chance that this poor soul survived this. So with that in mind, how does it make sense for me to just start racing again? I'll tell you how. I concocted a storyline in my head that when I crash and burn, that really happened. That driver died. But every vehicle on the track represents a team. So when this driver was killed, another racer representing the team was on standby, and they entered the race in an attempt to make it all the way to the checkered flag. Am I insane? Maybe, but I have to make things make sense. It's just in my nature. Also, check this out. You can pause the game at any moment and use the analog sticks to pan around the environment. Photo modes are all the rage these days. Motorstorm was using similar technology 15 years ago. Motorstorm obviously still holds a place in my heart, but am I alone in this? Am I the only person out there who loved this game upon release? Hell no, I wasn't. Look, Evolution Studios already had a great reputation, but this PS3 exclusive off-road racer really pushed them into the big time in the eyes of many. Motorstorm reviewed very, very well. IGN's Chris Roper called Motorstorm the system seller early in PlayStation 3's life, and he's not wrong. Sony themselves chose Motorstorm as the pack-in game to accompany their 80GB model of the console, and if that's not a sign of confidence, I don't know what is. The game was supported with downloadable content after release, which added tracks and vehicles, and at the end of the day, Motorstorm sold over 3.5 million copies at retail. 6 months after release, Sony said, you know what, let's make this official. And they bought both Evolution and their satellite studio, Big. To say Motorstorm was a big deal would be an understatement. And you know what happens when a project demolishes expectations and makes a ton of money, right? Yes indeed, the sequel bell was ringing, and it was ringing very, very loud. A year and a half after the release of the original, Motorstorm Pacific Rift would launch in October of 2008. We already understand the concept of what Motorstorm is and where it came from, so we don't have to set the stage anymore. We can dive straight into the awesome details. Let me get this out of the way up front. Pacific Rift is everything a sequel should be. It's bigger, it's better, it improves on the original in every way. Remember my complaint with the first game that there were only 8 tracks? Boom! Pacific Rift doubles that count. Did I mention that the 7 different vehicle classes in the original actually earned Evolution Studios a Guinness World Record? Give us another one, why not? Play as the monster truck and absolutely own the track. Back in 2007, we had straight up races, and that was it. Get out of here, ass! Pacific Rift adds in time attack mode. It adds in speed events where we're solo on a track and we have to get through a series of gates as fast as possible. And last but not least, Eliminator Competitions, where whoever is in last place when the time runs out is blown to pieces until only one racer is left standing. This was a transformative era not just for Motorstorm, but for the PlayStation 3 as well. You know, after a couple years of us PlayStation 3 guys looking over the fence at 360 players, being super jealous of achievements, we finally got something like that of our own in the shape of trophies. But that wasn't the only place where PlayStation was lacking. See, Xbox players could click that fancy little home button and play whatever music they desired right from their console. PlayStation? Nah, not so much. But right around that same time, we PlayStation folk were treated to another luxury that Xbox players had from day one. But hey, it made a big difference to me. Motorstorm Pacific Rift once again packs a banger of a soundtrack under its belt, with the returning Slipknot and Nirvana being bolstered by selections from Clutch and David Bowie. That's all awesome, but being able to play some of my personal favorite songs with no limitations will always be the best of the best. And the trophies, man. A good trophy list is extremely important. Pacific Rift's trophy list isn't what I'd call good. Many of these are extremely hard to earn, but hey, it was a step in the right direction nonetheless. If you're one of the 0.1% of players with this platinum trophy in your collection, goodness gracious, congratulations. As you can tell from the gameplay you've seen so far, Motorstorm Pacific Rift has completely gotten away from the original desert-themed aesthetic. Replacing the sand and dirt isn't just one new environment though, no way. Pacific Rift's festival mode is broken up into 4 distinct categories: Earth, Air, Fire, and Water. The Earth section is loaded with lush, green jungles. Events in the air category have us racing around mountains tall enough that these drivers probably needed some sort of oxygen mask. Good God. The fire-themed tickets are not playing around, man. We're talking raging infernos and erupting volcanoes that drip lava onto the courses. And the main event, the water-themed events, cool us down by dropping us into these beautiful, picturesque tropical settings. You like the beach? How about it? Again, 16 tracks spread across 3 different types of competition, 8 unique vehicle systems. This is a sequel. And the mechanics of the game have gotten an update as well. Every vehicle not only feels faster, but more responsive. The crash cam has greatly improved in order to highlight the also improved physics, which leads to the gnarliest and most explosive wrecks yet. And hey, maybe you've noticed the boost meter reacting to the environment. Look, when you're racing around a volcano, that boost meter is going to get way hotter, way quicker, which raises the risk of explosion. Waterfalls, beaches, or standing puddles can be used to cool down our engine at an expedited rate. Managing the boost meter while also making split-second decisions is a handful, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Upon release, Motorstorm Pacific Rift was met with high marks from every major outlet in the business. Sales-wise, the sequel would fall short of the original, but did indeed break the 1 million units sold milestone just 2 months after its launch. With 2 Motorstorm games released inside of a year and a half, Evolution Studios would wind up taking more time developing their 3rd PlayStation 3 installment, and in their absence, Big would step up to the plate. We've spent all this time talking about PlayStation 3, PlayStation 3, but now we're stepping out of 2008 and into 2009. You're thinking, yeah, and the PlayStation 4 is not going to be out for another 4 years. And to that, I say, you're looking in the wrong direction. Big Studios, the underling or partner or satellite studio of Evolution, was also purchased by Sony back in 2007. It was a package deal. Big weren't sitting on their hands doing nothing at all during the time that Evolution was working on Motorstorm. No. Big were busy creating the Pursuit Force series on the PSP, which, if you haven't played these, they're great. But in 2009, they'd take their familiarity with Sony's handheld system and apply it to Evolution Studios' biggest money-making franchise. Motorstorm Arctic Edge launched in September of 2009, and obviously, the game carries a winter-themed aesthetic. The addition of snowmobiles and other suitable vehicles add to our already deep garage, and now, the environments are more treacherous than ever. Bridges made of ice will eventually crumble under the massive weight of the vehicles, but that's not all. Avalanches can be triggered to bury our opponents in the snow. Or bury us in the snow, if we're not careful. Interestingly enough, Arctic Edge would be ported to the PlayStation 2 shortly after its PSP launch, but a PlayStation 3 version was never developed. Both iterations of Arctic Edge reviewed very well, bringing this still fairly new franchise's reputation to an all-time high. It didn't matter which PlayStation you had in your house, PS2, PSP, PS3, whatever. Motorstorm had become ubiquitous, but while big studios made their pit stop in the handheld and last-gen territory, Evolution were hard at work on their most ambitious project yet. Motorstorm Apocalypse, the final installment in the mainline PlayStation 3 trilogy, was scheduled to release in March of 2011. This time, the tracks weren't based around the earthly elements. Bone-dry deserts, tropical islands with cascading waterfalls, and volcanic peaks teetering on the edge of calamity are yesterday's news. And the Motorstorm Festival itself kind of takes a back seat, as the events of Apocalypse aren't simply themed around an annual Daredevil spectacle where it's all about the thrill of competition. Apocalypse actually features a story mode, and while there is still a Motorstorm Festival taking place, it's all happening around a city that is being ravaged by a lethal combination of natural disasters, rioting, looting, and a war between the citizens and the military. Do you remember at the top of this video where I mentioned some odd design choices that may have alienated a portion of Motorstorm's fan base? Don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking for all players here. Not at all. But I am speaking for myself when I ask, who the hell thought Motorstorm needed a story mode? Why does a racing game need a story mode to begin with? Let alone the third installment of a racing franchise where the first two entries had nothing resembling a narrative aspect. I'm not gonna spend 20 minutes trashing Apocalypse, don't worry, but I do feel the need to highlight a few of these less than stellar aspects of the game. The story mode is told through a series of motion comics, which, and I'm just being honest here, are nothing to write home about. If adding a story mode in general wasn't odd enough, who decided on this art style? These are some of the most generic looking characters I've ever seen, and the animation looks amateur at best. Absolutely nothing about this presentation says Motorstorm to me in any way whatsoever, which leads to the narrative aspect feeling completely disconnected from everything else. After 5 or 6 of these motion comics played through, and they're inserted between every single race you play, I'm sorry to admit that I started skipping them. Nobody was saying anything of note. There was nothing at stake. I learned quickly that nobody was going to be reacting to my performance in the races. It's a complete waste of time. I can only assume that there was pressure on Evolution Studios to revamp Motorstorm and give it a look that was more in line with Sony's other first-party offerings of the era. Infamous used a similar motion comic style for certain cutscenes. But this was a total miss, at least for me. Sadly, the unnecessary story mode isn't the only area where Apocalypse goes off the rails. On the surface, the concept of racing through a city enraptured by war and disaster sounds like a blast. But in action, I can't lie to you guys, the crumbling skyscrapers, the explosions, the collapsing bridges, it's all unbelievably distracting. I've used the phrase split-second decisions several times across this retrospective, right? In a racing game where the player is screaming around a track at 100 miles per hour, we've got to stay focused on our surroundings. Wide open areas can merge into tight corridors in an instant, so keeping our eyes on the road is of utmost importance. Apocalypse doesn't just draw your eyes elsewhere, it sometimes even takes control of the camera completely, which is one of the most disorienting things I've ever experienced in a game like this. Not to mention, the disasters and collapses aren't just visual, they actually close off paths and drop debris onto the track. What's more fun than a cloud of dust covering an obstruction that you don't know is right in front of you? How about almost anything else in the world? The vehicles themselves don't feel the same either, and I don't mean that in a good way. Look, I've buried this game enough, but I want to make something clear. Motorstorm Apocalypse is not a bad game at all. I'm just somebody who loved the first two installments a great deal, and these changes were not what I was looking for out of a third chapter. On the positive side, there are even more vehicle classes this time. The track count has been bumped up to 40, which is incredible. And there's always recreation mode to play around with if you don't feel like spending all of your time in the story. We can even fully customize all of our vehicles, applying stickers, custom parts, and unique paint jobs to show off our creativity. Would I recommend Motorstorm Apocalypse to someone looking for a fun racer? I would, yeah. And I'm not alone in that recommendation, as Apocalypse once again scored very highly with critics across the industry. Eurogamer called Apocalypse the best Motorstorm yet, so keep in mind, I'm only one person. Motorstorm Apocalypse would unfortunately wind up going down in the history books as a commercial failure. Now, is that because I didn't like the story mode? No, obviously not. Is it because this third installment, or fourth overall if we're counting Arctic Edge, was just too much Motorstorm? Also no. Nobody possibly could have seen this coming, but when I stated earlier that Apocalypse was scheduled to release in March of 2011, I worded it that way for a reason. March 11th, 2011 will go down in the record books as the home of one of the worst natural disasters in history. Tohoku, Japan would be ravaged by the fourth most powerful earthquake in recorded history. This earthquake would trigger a horrifying tsunami, which would eventually cause the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Not only would hundreds of billions of dollars in damage be done to people's homes, private businesses, and more, but nearly 20,000 innocent people would lose their lives. Sony would make the decision to delay Motorstorm Apocalypse across the world, feeling it would be in bad taste to release a game not only featuring, but arguably celebrating similarly depicted disasters. The US release date was pushed back, then it was pushed back again, and when it did launch, it was done quietly. The game's Japanese release would be cancelled altogether. Longtime Evolution Studios vet and Motorstorm Apocalypse director Matt Southern would tell Eurogamer in 2011 that he feared Evolution Studios would be shut down after the failure of Apocalypse, but Sony instead gave the studio room to create further. Motorstorm RC, a remote-controlled themed racer carrying the Motorstorm branding, would be the final entry into the storied racing franchise. This new take on the series would be received very well by critics and would sell well on the PlayStation Network, but this was Motorstorm's checkered flag, the final go across the finish line. 2 years later, Evolution Studios would move on to Drive Club, a title initially planned to be available at the launch of the PlayStation 4. Drive Club would be bogged down with delay after delay and wouldn't find its way onto store shelves until a year after the PlayStation 4 had launched. Evolution Studios was officially closed down by Sony in 2016. Shortly thereafter, British gaming company Codemasters would bring Evolution into the fold as Codemasters Evo. In 2018, Codemasters Evo, the team made primarily of former Motorstorm talents, would release Onrush, a game bursting at the seams with Motorstorm influence and DNA. Despite reviewing very well and being far and away my favorite racing game of the entire generation, Onrush hit store shelves and was immediately declared dead on arrival. It was at this point that even the second coming of Evolution Studios, Codemasters Evo, would be torn apart by layoffs. Even though the ending of this story doesn't come with confetti and balloons, there is a good deal of heartwarming information still to go around. Though the final official Motorstorm online servers were unplugged in 2012, you know what they say, if there's a will, there's a way. Fan group PlayStation Online Network Emulated have resurrected the original game's online playability, proving that there is still a die-hard, loving Motorstorm community out there in the ether. At the end of the day, Motorstorm largely existed in a short window of time, encapsulated entirely in the PlayStation 3 generation. With over 6 million units sold at retail and rumors popping up every year or so about a possible reboot, it remains clear that much like the jaw-dropping tire tracks left in the digital mud of 2007, Motorstorm left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of gamers around the world. This video isn't just a retrospective covering the history of the franchise. I hope this video acts as both a thank you to those involved with Motorstorm's development and a shout out to the Motorstorm fans around the world. It may be gone, but it's definitely not forgotten. Oh my goodness, what a journey, Dan-Dans. Thank you very much for watching the life and death of Motorstorm. The History of God of War premieres 6/16/2022, but we're not going to sit on our hands and wait for that date to come. The Life and Death of Turok premieres April 15th, 2022. If you liked this video and you like my other retrospectives and you want to see more like it, consider heading over to patreon.com/616entertainment. I always say that your support means the world to me, and it's your support that makes videos like this possible to begin with. So if you want to see more, give it some thought. Until next time, I love ya, and I will see you soon.